While searching for my wife at her office, I noticed a gold-plated pen engraved with my daughter's name. The moment I picked it up, I heard a mechanical click. A hidden wall opened before my eyes. Curiosity drove me to step inside. What I found made my hands tremble and took my breath away, because the truth I'd been searching for all this time had been imprisoned in this very room. Thank you for being here. Before we continue, hit like, subscribe, and comment where you're watching from. Quick note, this is a fictional story with dramatized elements for storytelling and educational value. Any resemblance to real events is coincidental, but the message is deeply meaningful. Now let me tell you what happened next. The Seattle rain hadn't let up since morning. I drove through it anyway, wipers slapping a rhythm against the windshield that matched the unease in my chest. I needed to see Vanessa, to talk, to feel connected to something. Anything that didn't remind me that my daughter had been gone for 6 months and 3 days. Columbia Center rose like a steel monolith against the gray November sky. 76 floors of glass and ambition. Pierce Development Corporation occupied the 28th floor had for 18 years. I'd built this company from the ground up with my late wife Jennifer. Now it felt like walking through someone else's dream. I parked in my reserved spot and took the elevator up, barely noticing the familiar hum of machinery or the soft chime at each floor. My mind was elsewhere. It had been elsewhere since April 15th. Since the day Natalie's car was found abandoned near Rattlesnake Ledge, doors open, keys inside, no sign of my daughter anywhere. The elevator doors opened onto the 28th floor. Our reception area was all dark wood and understated elegance, Jennifer's design years ago. Amanda Clark looked up from behind the curved desk, her professional smile faltering just slightly when she saw me. "Mr. Pierce," she said, her voice careful. "I wasn't expecting you today." "Is Vanessa in?" I asked, keeping my tone light. Lately, everyone spoke to me like I was made of glass, like if they said the wrong thing, I'd shatter. Amanda glanced at her computer screen. "She's with a client right now. A design consultation. Should be another 20 minutes or so." She paused. "Would you like me to let her know you're here?" I shook my head. "No need. I'll wait in her office." I had a key. Vanessa had given it to me 6 months ago after we'd gotten married. "You're always welcome in my space," she'd said, pressing the small silver key into my palm. At the time, it had felt like trust, like intimacy. Now, walking down the hallway toward her corner office, I wasn't sure what it felt like. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. Vanessa's office was everything mine wasn't: warm, inviting, filled with soft textures and carefully chosen art. A massive mahogany desk sat beneath windows that looked out over Elliott Bay. On clear days, you could see the Olympic Mountains. Today, there was only fog. I dropped into one of the leather chairs facing her desk, trying to shake off the cold that had settled in my bones. The office smelled like her perfume, something subtle, expensive, floral. For a moment, I let myself close my eyes and just breathe. When I opened them again, my gaze landed on her desk. It was immaculate, as always. A silver pen holder, a small succulent in a ceramic pot, a leather-bound planner closed, and beside the planner, lying at an angle like someone had set it down in a hurry, was a pen. Not just any pen. A Mont Blanc. Gold-plated. The kind that weighs more than it should, that feels serious in your hand. I knew that pen. My heart did something strange, a stutter step, that made me sit forward, suddenly alert. I reached across the desk and picked it up, my fingers closing around the cool metal barrel. There, just above the clip, barely visible unless you were looking for it, were 2 words engraved in delicate script: Natalie P. The air left my lungs. I turned the pen over in my hands, searching for some explanation, some reason this couldn't be what I knew it was. But there was no mistaking it. I'd had this pen custom-made 4 years ago at a little shop in Pioneer Square. Jennifer and I had picked it out together for Natalie's 18th birthday. We'd spent 20 minutes debating the font for the engraving. Natalie had loved it. She'd carried it everywhere, to classes, to coffee shops, to late-night study sessions. "It makes me feel professional," she'd joked. "Like a real adult." She'd promised she'd never lose it. But Natalie had been missing since April. The police had found her car 40 minutes outside the city, abandoned on a trail access road. Her phone had been inside, screen shattered. Her wallet, her keys. But no Natalie. The official theory was that she'd gone hiking alone. Maybe fallen, maybe gotten lost in the dense forest that surrounded Rattlesnake Ledge. Search and rescue had combed the area for 2 weeks. They'd found nothing. After a month, Detective Hayes had sat across from me in my living room and said the words I'd been dreading, "Mr. Pierce, at this point, we have to consider the possibility that Natalie isn't coming back." I'd stopped listening after that. So why was her pen, the pen she'd promised never to lose, sitting on my wife's desk? I stood up, still holding it, my mind racing through possibilities. Maybe Natalie had visited Vanessa before she disappeared. Maybe she'd left it here by accident. Maybe no. That didn't make sense. Natalie and Vanessa weren't close. My daughter had been polite to my new wife, but distant. There was no reason for Natalie to have been in this office. Unless. I stared at the pen, turning it over again. It was heavier than I remembered. Too heavy. On instinct, or maybe desperation, I gripped the pen firmly and pulled upward. For a second, nothing happened. Then I heard it, a soft, mechanical click, like the sound of a lock disengaging. I froze. The wall behind Vanessa's bookshelf, the one lined with design portfolios and leather-bound volumes, shuddered. Then, with a low hum, the entire section began to slide to the left, revealing a gap I hadn't known existed. Behind the wall was darkness and stairs, a narrow staircase descending into a space that shouldn't be there. I stood at the edge of Vanessa's office, the pen still clutched in my hand, staring into a black void I couldn't explain. My heart hammered against my ribs. My mouth had gone dry. Somewhere in the building, I heard the muffled chime of an elevator. Voices in the hallway. I should have called someone. I should have backed away, found Amanda, asked questions. Instead, I took a step forward. And then another. The darkness swallowed me whole. The air changed as I descended. Colder. Thicker. The kind of air that hasn't moved in a long time. I found the wall with my left hand, rough concrete, slightly damp, and used it to guide myself down. Each step was narrow, steep, the kind of stairs that weren't meant to be used often. I counted them without thinking. 10, 15, 20. At the bottom, my eyes adjusted slowly to the dim light. There was a single LED fixture in the ceiling, casting everything in a pale, clinical glow. What I saw made no sense. A room. Maybe 12 feet by 15. The walls were covered in some kind of foam paneling, soundproofing, I realized, with a sick lurch in my stomach. In one corner, a single bed with a thin mattress and a gray blanket. Beside it, a small table with a bottle of water and what looked like protein bars. Against the opposite wall, a mini fridge, the kind you'd find in a college dorm, a narrow door, presumably a bathroom. And in the far corner, mounted high where it could see everything, a camera with a blinking red light. The room was clean, organized. Someone had designed this space with care. I took one step forward, my mind struggling to process what I was seeing. And that's when I noticed the figure on the bed. She was curled on her side, facing away from me, her body small beneath the blanket. For a moment, I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Dark hair, longer than I remembered, tangled and dull, thin shoulders. A hand resting on the pillow fingers, pale and delicate. Natalie. My voice cracked on her name. The figure stirred. Slowly, she turned over, blinking in the dim light. When her eyes found mine, They went wide not with recognition, but with something closer to disbelief. Like she was seeing a ghost. Not to Lee. I said again, and this time I was moving, crossing the small space in 3 strides, dropping to my knees beside the bed. She pushed herself up on one elbow, staring at me. Her face was gaunt shadows under her eyes, her cheekbones sharper than they should be. But it was her. My daughter. Alive. Dad. The word was barely a whisper. I reached for her, and she flinched just slightly, an instinctive recoil, but then she seemed to understand that I was real, that this wasn't some trick or hallucination. She collapsed forward into my arms, and then she was sobbing. Deep, wrenching sobs that shook her whole body. I held her one hand, cradling the back of her head, the other wrapped around her 2 thin shoulders, and I felt my own tears streak hot down my face. "You're here," she kept saying over and over. "You're really here." "I'm here, sweetheart. I'm here. I've got you." I pulled back just enough to look at her to catalog the damage. She was pale, too pale and thin in a way that made my chest ache. Her hair was matted, her lips chapped. There were dark circles under her eyes that spoke of sleepless nights and fear, but her eyes were clear, focused. She was weak, but she was coherent. "How?" Her voice caught. "How did you find me?" "Your pen," I said, still trying to wrap my mind around the impossibility of this moment. "The Mont Blanc. It was on Vanessa's desk. When I picked it up," I gestured vaguely toward the stairs. The wall opened. Natalie's expression shifted. Something dark and knowing passed over her face. "She kept it," Natalie said, her voice hollow. "She kept it as I don't know, a trophy maybe." "Natalie, what happened? Where have you been? We thought—" I couldn't finish the sentence. "We thought you were gone. We thought you were lost in the woods, that we'd never—" "She drugged me." Natalie said, her voice steadier now, though her hands were shaking. "Vanessa, 6 months ago, April. She asked me to meet her. Said she wanted to talk. Woman to woman. Try to, I don't know, build a relationship or something." I felt my jaw tighten. "Where?" "Here at the office, after hours. She said she had a bottle of wine in her office that we could just talk." Natalie's laugh was bitter broken. "I didn't want to come, but I thought maybe I was being unfair to her. Maybe I should try." "Natalie." "She gave me a glass of wine. We talked for maybe 10 minutes, and then I started feeling strange. Dizzy. She said I looked pale, that maybe I should sit down. I remember sitting in her chair. And then—" Natalie's voice trailed off. "I woke up here. My hands curled into fists. I thought of Vanessa, my wife, the woman who'd held me when I cried over Natalie's disappearance, who'd sat with me through sleepless nights, who'd told me we had to keep hoping, keep believing. She'd been lying the entire time. While I'd been falling apart, she'd known exactly where Natalie was." "How long have you been here?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. 6 months, Natalie whispered. "She comes down once a week, brings food, checks on me. Natalie's voice cracked. "She told me no one would ever find me, that eventually the law would declare me gone. And then—" She swallowed hard. "She said it wouldn't matter anymore." I pulled her close again, pressing my forehead to the top of her head. I'm so sorry. God, Natalie, I'm so sorry." "You didn't know," she said quietly. "How could you have known?" "But I should have. That was the thing that would haunt me. I'd married Vanessa a year after Jennifer passed away. I'd brought her into our lives, into our home. I'd trusted her. And all this time I couldn't think about it. Not now. Right now, the only thing that mattered was getting Natalie out. "Can you walk?" I asked, pulling back to look at her again. She nodded, though she looked uncertain. "I think so. I'm just weak. She doesn't give me much. Just enough to keep me—" She trailed off, unable to say the word. "Alive." "Okay." I stood, then reached down to help her up. She swayed on her feet, and I steadied her, my arm around her waist. She weighed almost nothing. "We're getting you out of here. Right now." "What about Vanessa?" Natalie asked, her voice trembling. "Nah, she'll know. She'll see on the camera. I don't care," I said, and I meant it. Let Vanessa see. Let her know I'd found what she'd hidden. "We're leaving. Come on." I guided her toward the stairs, moving slowly, letting her lean on me. Her legs shook with each step, but she kept moving. As we reached the bottom of the staircase and started to climb, I looked back one last time at the room. The clinical lighting, the soundproof walls, the camera still blinking its red eye. Someone had built this, planned it, made it a prison. And my wife had kept my daughter here for half a year. We climbed. We reached the top of the stairs, just as the sharp click of heels echoed down the hallway outside Vanessa's office. My blood went cold. "Dad." Natalie started to speak, but I pressed a finger to my lips and pulled her toward the back wall. My hand fumbled along the seam of a narrow service door I'd seen maintenance crews use years ago. It gave way with a soft creak, and we slipped into a dim, concrete corridor that smelled of old paint and machine oil. The hallway was silent except for our ragged breathing. Natalie leaned heavily against my shoulder, her legs trembling. I could hear her trying not to cry. Behind us, the muffled sound of Vanessa's voice filtered through the walls. She was talking to someone, maybe Amanda, at the front desk. "We have to move," I whispered. At the end of the corridor, a dented freight elevator waited with its heavy metal gate half open. I guided Natalie inside, pulled the gate closed as quietly as I could, and hit the button for the parking garage. The elevator groaned and lurched downward. Each floor felt like an eternity. I watched the numbers descend 27, 26, 25, and prayed Vanessa wouldn't notice the service panel light up on her floor. When the doors finally opened onto the dim concrete of the underground garage, I scanned the rows of parked cars. Mine was near the back exit. I wrapped my arm around Natalie's waist and half carried her toward it. She was so light, so fragile. 6 months in that room had stolen her strength. I opened the back door and helped her slide across the seat. "Lie down," I said, pulling off my coat and draping it over her. "Stay low. Don't let anyone see you." She nodded, her pale face disappearing beneath the fabric. I climbed into the driver's seat, started the engine, and drove out of the garage as calmly as I could manage. My hands were shaking on the wheel. The streets of Seattle blurred past. I kept checking the rearview mirror, half expecting to see Vanessa's car tailing us. But there was nothing. Just rain and brake lights, and the ordinary flow of Friday afternoon traffic. I drove north toward Laurelhurst, toward the one person I knew I could trust. Harold Peterson had been our family's lawyer for nearly 20 years. He'd handled Jennifer's will when she passed 5 years ago, and he'd been the one to comfort me through the worst months of my grief. If anyone could help us now, it was Harold. His house sat at the end of a quiet, tree-lined street, a brick Tudor with ivy climbing the walls. I pulled into the driveway and sent him a single text, "Emergency. At your door, please." Seconds later, the front door opened. Harold stood there in a cardigan and slippers, his silver hair disheveled. When he saw me, his expression shifted from confusion to alarm. "Jonathan, what's—" "I need your help," I said. I opened the back door and gently lifted Natalie to her feet. Harold's face went white. "My God. Natalie?" His wife Linda appeared behind him, her hand flying to her mouth. She rushed forward and took Natalie's other arm, guiding her inside. They led her to the living room couch, and Linda disappeared into the kitchen, returning moments later with a thick blanket and a glass of water. Natalie took the water with trembling hands and drank slowly. She looked so small, wrapped in that blanket, her eyes hollow and haunted. Harold sat down across from us, his lawyer instincts kicking in despite the shock. "Jonathan, where has she been? We need to call the police." "No," I said sharply. "Not yet." I told him everything. The pen, the hidden staircase, the room beneath Vanessa's office, the camera still recording in that concrete cell. Harold listened in silence, his face growing darker with every word. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and exhaled slowly. "This is kidnapping," he said. "You understand that, right? Vanessa held your daughter captive for 6 months." "I know." My voice cracked. "But if we call the police now, she'll know. She'll destroy the evidence. That camera, the room, everything could disappear before anyone can see it." Natalie's voice was barely a whisper. "She drugged me." We all turned to look at her. 6 months ago. Natalie continued, staring down at her hands. "April 15th. Vanessa invited me to meet her for coffee. She said she wanted to talk to clear the air between us. I didn't trust her, but I thought maybe we could find some way to get along." Her voice trembled. "She put something in my drink. I woke up in that room. She told me no one would look for me. She said they'd found my car abandoned near Rattlesnake Ledge Trail. She said eventually they'd assume I was gone, and then no one would ever ask questions." My chest tightened. Rattlesnake Ledge, a popular hiking spot east of the city known for its steep cliffs and dangerous terrain. Of course, a staged accident. "She came to see me every week," Natalie said. "She brought food, water. She told me it was only temporary. That once everything was settled legally, she'd let me go." I didn't believe that for a second. Neither did Harold. Then Natalie looked up at me, her eyes filled with something I hadn't expected, fear mixed with anger. "Dad," she said quietly. It wasn't just Vanessa. My stomach dropped. Uncle Stephen was part of it too. The room went silent. Stephen Barrett, my business partner, my friend of 18 years, the man who'd stood beside me at Jennifer's funeral, who'd helped me rebuild Pierce Development when I could barely get out of bed. "No," I said. "That's not—" "I heard them talking," Natalie said. High through the camera. They thought I was asleep, but I heard everything. He helped her plan it. The world tilted beneath me. Harold placed a steady hand on my shoulder. "Jonathan, we need to decide what we're going to do. And we need to do it now." I stared at my daughter, alive, rescued, but still so far from safe, and felt the weight of every choice I'd ever made pressing down on me. Outside, the rain kept falling on Seattle. Harold stood up from his chair, his face flushed with urgency. "Jonathan, we have to call the police. Right now. This is a criminal case, kidnapping, false imprisonment. God knows what else. Every minute we wait is a minute Vanessa and Stephen could use to cover their tracks." I shook my head slowly. "If we call the police now, they'll know. Vanessa will know the second officers show up at Columbia Center. She'll destroy the room, wipe the camera footage, claim she has no idea what we're talking about. By the time investigators get a warrant, there won't be anything left to find. Jonathan and Stephen." I continued, my voice harder now. "He's the CFO of Pierce Development. He has access to every file, every account, every piece of documentation we've ever created. If he knows we're onto him, he'll burn it all before anyone can prove a thing." Harold opened his mouth to argue, then closed it again. He looked at Natalie, who sat curled beneath the blanket on his couch, her eyes distant and unfocused. She'd been through hell. The last thing she needed was to watch her rescue fall apart, because we moved too fast. "So, what do you want to do?" Harold asked quietly. "I need time," I said. "Time to gather evidence. Time to figure out exactly what they've done and why. Then we go to the authorities with something they can't ignore." Harold was silent for a long moment. Finally, he sighed and walked over to his desk. He opened a drawer, pulled out a business card, and handed it to me. The card was simple, printed on heavy cream-colored stock: Sharon Mitchell, private investigator, former FBI special agent, a phone number, an email address, nothing else. "Sharon worked major fraud cases for the Bureau for 15 years, Harold said. "She's discreet, thorough, and she knows how to build a case that'll hold up in court. If anyone can help you do this the right way, it's her." I looked down at the card, then back at Harold. "Thank you." He nodded, but his expression remained troubled. "Just promise me one thing. If this gets dangerous, if Vanessa or Stephen realizes what you're doing, you call the police immediately. No hesitation. Understood." "Understood." I pulled out my phone and dialed the number on the card. It rang 3 times before a calm, professional voice answered. "Mitchell Investigations." "Ms. Mitchell, my name is Jonathan Pierce. Harold Peterson gave me your number. I need your help with a sensitive matter." There was a brief pause. "Harold's a good man. What kind of matter are we talking about?" I glanced at Natalie, then at Harold. "It's complicated. I'd rather explain in person. Can you meet tonight?" "Yes. There's a cafe near Pike Place Market, corner of First and Pine, 8 o'clock. I'll be there." "Good. And Mr. Pierce." Her voice sharpened slightly. "Come alone. If this is as sensitive as you say, we don't need an audience." The line went dead. I pocketed my phone and looked at Harold. "I have to go home first. If Vanessa suspects anything, if she realizes Natalie's gone, this whole thing falls apart." Linda appeared in the doorway holding a tray with soup and crackers. She set it down in front of Natalie and gave me a long, searching look. "Be careful," she said softly. I nodded. "Natalie stays here. Don't let anyone know she's with you. Not even your neighbors." Harold walked me to the door. As I stepped outside into the cool evening air, my phone buzzed. Vanessa's name lit up the screen. My stomach tightened. I answered, forcing my voice to sound casual. "Hey. Honey, where are you?" Vanessa's tone was light, almost playful. "I tried calling you earlier, but you didn't pick up. I was starting to worry." "Sorry, I was in back-to-back meetings all afternoon. You know how Fridays get." The lie came so easily, it scared me. "Just wrapped up a budget review with Vincent Call."